Hello class, I'm Piaget, and today we're going to talk about Piaget's stages of cognitive development. By the end of this class or discussion, we're going to be able to describe each stage of cognitive development, explain the role of assimilation and accommodation in learning in children, and then explain the educational implications of each stage. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce the man himself, Mr. Piaget. Now, Mr. Piaget was born in 1896 in Switzerland, and up until the age of 21, he studied biology, and then he became employed by the Binet Institute in 1920s to develop French versions of intelligence tests, and these tests were originally English-based, and what he did was during his work at the Binet Institute, he became interested in reasons why the children seemed to struggle more with questions that involve logical reasoning. And due to this, his biology shifted to psychology, and he devoted a lot of time to the research of cognitive development in specifically children. Now, through Piaget's research, he concluded with his observations that children are not less intelligent than adults, but they merely think in different ways, so strikingly different ways of thinking. And that really depended on the age of the child. His theory was very unique. It was different than theories of other contemporary psychologists like Vygotsky. And the reason for that is because, one, he was concerned with only really children in his theory, and it focuses on development rather than the learning of the specific information or behaviors. And thirdly, and probably the most important difference, is that it proposes discrete stages of development rather than a gradually increasing complexity of behaviors and ideas that other theories have suggested. Now, I'm going to outline these stages for you right now. His 4 discrete stages start with birth to 2 years. It's the sensory motor stage of development. Then from 2 to 7 years, it's the pre-operational stage of development. Then you got the concrete observational from 7 to 11 years, and then the formal observational or operational stage from adolescence to adulthood. All right, I'm going to go through each stage right now to kind of show you what you could expect from the child in this stage, as well as some educational implications of each. The sensory motor stage, again, is from birth to 2 years. It's a stage where the child is a baby, essentially. And so the baby really focuses, in order to learn, on its physical environment. And really, the world that it knows in the beginning is everything that it immediately becomes in contact with and everything that surrounds it. So it relies really heavily on its senses, touch, smell, sight, hearing, and it also learns about the world through trial and error. Towards the end, or towards the middle actually, the child is able to understand about object permanence, which basically refers to the fact that a child can understand that even though it can't see an object or hear it or smell it, it still is in existence. It lends to the fact that the child is increasing in its ability to remember. Also, early language development is evident at the end of this stage, which shows that the child is actually becoming more adept with symbolic activity, right, and able to represent things that are not immediately in front of them. Some educational implications and learning strategies. Really, there's no formal schooling during the sensory motor stage, but you should provide a rich and stimulating environment and provide a lot of opportunity for a child to learn about the cause and effect relationships, which they do with trial and error. For instance, shaking a rattle. They'll learn that when they shake a rattle, it'll make noise. Or a rubber duck. When they squeeze the duck, it's going to squeak. All right, moving on to the next stage, which is the pre-operational stage, which goes from 2 to 7 years. And this is really a toddlerhood. This is when the child is considered a toddler still. its symbolic activity or ability continues to heighten, and therefore language, development and acquiring of language is really a hallmark of this stage. It's the child is engaged mostly in egocentric thinking, though, which means that the child can't really see from others' perspectives, only their own perspective. And they have a lack of understanding of concrete logic and a lack of understanding of conservation, right? Which means that even though an object might change its form or shape, it can still retain its properties. I'm going to show you what this might look like right now. Hi, what's your name?
Kara.
Hi, Kara. How old are you?
5.
5 years old. So I have a question for you. I have 2 cups of water, and would you agree that they have the same amount of water in them? Good. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this cup and I'm going to pour it into a new cup. Now take a look at those cups and tell me, does the new cup have more, less, or the same amount of water as the cup next to it?
Less.
You think less?
Yeah.
Thank you, Kara. Now, as you can see, in this pre-operational phase or stage, Kara was unable to reconcile the fact that the properties of the water, including the amount, stayed the same even though the size of the glass was changed or the shape of the glass was changed. And a lot of times children in this stage of development are unable to reconcile the fact that they need to take into account many different things in order to come to a conclusion. Sometimes they just focus on one thing, like the height of the glass. So some educational learning strategies that can be used in this stage. Children in this stage use or learn best through physical methods. So field trips, projects, hands-on projects, manipulation of physical objects, like in math you can use blocks to teach addition and subtraction, and just avoid too many worksheets and inundating the students with textbook activities because they really do need that physical component to learn. Alright, and in the next phase, or next stage, which is the concrete operation stage, which spans from 7 to 12 years, children begin to think logically about concrete ideas and events. And this is significant because in the stage before, children are mainly using their intuition instead of logic. They also abandon the egocentric thinking and replace it with a more sociocentric thinking, which means that they could see things from the perspective of others and realize that their perspective may not be correct or may not be the only one around. They also have operational thinking now. They are able to think their way forwards through a problem and as well as backwards through a problem. That's called reversibility. Students still struggle with problems with several variables, and they still struggle with abstract and hypothetical concepts. They're good with inductive reasoning, meaning they're able to take an event and then tie it back to a general principle, but they're not able to deductively reason, meaning take a general concept and predict what might happen in a specific event. Let's go and check back with Kara and see how her egocentric thinking has changed. Hi Kara, welcome back.
Hi.
How old are you now?
9.
9 years old. Okay. We're going to play another game today. And I know we're joined by somebody, right? Who is that?
Teta.
Teta. Okay, Teta. Well, hello, Teta. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this candle, I'm going to put it underneath one of these mugs right here. This mug. Now, what I want you to do is I want you to tell Teta to leave us for a second and go to the next room.
You have to go to the next room.
Is she gone?
Yeah.
Just tell her I'm sorry.
She's gone.
Alright. Now, what I'm going to do, let's keep it a secret. I'm going to take the candle and I'm going to put it under the middle one. Now, tell Teta to come back in.
You can come back.
Alright.
She's here.
Could you ask Teta which mug she believes the candle's under?
Which one do you think the candle's under? This one.
So she thinks this one. Why does she think that?
Because when you put it under there, she was here, but then she left the room, and she doesn't know that it's not under there anymore.
Okay, and what do you think it's under?
this one.
Because you were in here the whole time?
Yeah.
Thank you, Kara. Now, as you can see in the concrete operational stage, Kara is able to think from the perspective of others. In this case, that being her imaginary friend, she is still able to think from their perspective and realize that her perspective is not the only one. So in education, as it applies to education and learning, the implications of this stage would lend themselves to more challenging activities than the previous stages for students that really promote creativity and conceptual thought. So students should be classifying objects and ideas. They should be doing more complex experiments than they've done in previous stages, have class-wise discussions, and even write from different perspectives using, say, a raft format: role, audience, format, and topic. These are all things that should be done to promote learning in concrete operational stage. Lastly, the last stage is going to be the formal operational stage, which spans from adolescence into adulthood. Now, let's note before this that only 35% of students reach this formal operational stage by 12th grade, which is surprising to me because students are required to think abstractly in high school and they're thought of as higher level. In this stage, concrete objects are no longer needed to solve problems. Students can solve things in their head and they can represent things that are not immediately in front of them. And this lends itself to students excelling in algebra and science because they're heavily focused on variables and representing abstract ideas and concepts. Solving problems with multiple variables is not a challenge, or it is a challenge, but not as much of a challenge as it was. And students are able to systematically solve problems and approach them from different angles as well, which is good. You can have several different ways to solve a problem, and students are able to think through that. They're also able to formulate hypotheses. They're able to consider possibilities, and as well as think abstractly about what might happen. And this is more deductive reasoning, taking general principles that they know and then being able to predict what might happen in a situation. And lastly, they ponder abstract relationships such as justice, which is something that is difficult for students in lower stages to actually do. The educational and learning implications include very high-level activities such as debates, Socratic seminars, and these really promote abstract thinking, thinking from others' perspectives, and there isn't always a right or wrong answer. Also, the dissection of literature and media to see underlying messages that may not be evident, as well as hypothetical thinking and making sure that students, when they do science experiments, for instance, make a prediction based upon knowledge that they have pre-existing. And teach concepts broadly. Make sure that when students are being taught, for example, if you taught the Civil War, that you also talk about other things related to the Civil War, like the Civil Rights Movement, and try to relate things for students so they have a better grasp and understanding of what you're talking about. Now, even though Piaget focused mainly on development of children rather than actual learning and education in the classroom with his theory did have many educational implications, which I'm going to talk to you about now. And firstly, his theory really did emphasize that we need to focus on the process of learning, not just the products, meaning that you need to know how a student actually arrived at their answer, not just what their answer was. And a lot of times, in state standardized tests, this is not reflected because children are expected to answer a multiple choice question but not explain how they arrived at that answer. So that's something we should think about. Also, recognition of children's active involvement in the learning process. You can't just tell students what the answer is or talk at them. You need to put them in a state of disequilibrium and then have them find their way out by discovering and inquiring. That's the learning process, and that's the way they internalize information. De-emphasis on the practice of making students more adult-like. Piaget had thought that you really cannot accelerate the process of development, and if you tried to teach students something that they were not ready to learn, or a concept they were not ready to internalize, it could hurt them more than not teaching them at all, because it would be really hard to debunk what you have taught them, and they're not really going to understand the concept at that point. And number 4, the acceptance of individual differences in the developmental process. This really lends itself to differentiated instruction. Not every student is going to develop at the same rate. There are going to be many students that are lagging behind their peers, and this is why differentiated instruction is needed, because not every student is going to be willing and or really ready cognitively to be on the same level as the rest of their classmates. And really the key point here is that students need to constantly be put in a state of disequilibrium and need to find their way out. Using discovery and learning for themselves. They can't rely and be spoon-fed everything and expect them to learn. I'm going to leave you with some questions to ponder now. And I'm really interested in seeing what you think. And the first question refers to the fact that there are a lot of people that criticize and that have questions about whether Piaget's theory is the right way to look at things. And obviously it's a theory, so it's something that Piaget believed, but might not be something that is in the best interest of all children. So, first, in Dennis Child's book, Psychology and the Teacher, in 1997, he points out that Piaget's view is pessimistic if the teacher is expected to sit back and wait for the child to develop. Teachers should, by the right technique, be able to encourage the students and children to progress through the stages. So knowing that about Piaget's theory, or knowing about Piaget's theory, do you agree with Child's assessment of the situation? Do you think Piaget is being pessimistic? Do you think that children can be accelerated? Tell me why or why not. All right, and number 2, I would like to know, knowing Piaget's theory on the stages of cognitive development, how can technology be incorporated into the classroom or into learning at every level? Now, there's an interesting article written by the New York Times. If you Google for a reference for this question, Google New York Times, "So Young, So Gadgeted," and it'll there will be an article that you can use, and it takes you through the levels of development and how it relates to what students and children are doing now regarding cell phones and other things. So thank you for listening, and I really do look forward to your feedback and to hearing from you, and have a great day.